welcome to the Bandit Flight Simmer channel, and today we are in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, in the Diamond DA62, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a tutorial on using the new Working Title G1000 NXi mod that you can get for free on the marketplace in the simulator. So weather looks great here. We're going to do a quick trip from Vancouver to Kelowna, British Columbia, and we're going to go over some of the features of the G1000 NXi. So without further ado, let's hop in the cockpit and start setting up the system. Okay, so we're on the runway in Vancouver here, runway 8 right, just in the essence of saving some time to get started here. So I'm going to do the setup on the G1000 NXi here, and then we'll head off to Kelowna. So let's take a look at the nav display here, and a lot of the functions don't work down here, the grayed out functions still, but they've just updated to the second update here, and it's the usability of the NXi system is very good now, and I have no hesitation using it for IFR flying or VATSIM or anything like that, so it seems to be working really well. So what we'll do is we'll load in a flight plan and show you how to do that, and then we'll get up on our way and go over some of the features. Okay, so we'll start off with the flight plan page here, and basically it's the same setup. If you watch my last video, inputting the thing here, you have to cursor down to here and then use the outer knob, and then you can start to get your letters here, or you can just go up here and click here and type in the CYVR just like that, and you can go enter. And if you want to select a runway, select the outer knob here, and we can select 8 right, go enter, and there it shows origin Vancouver 8 right. We can go down to our destination and do the same thing. And we're going to put in Kelowna CYLW, and we'll hit enter, and they're going to be using runway 34 in Kelowna. So we'll put that in. Now we're going to enter our route, and I got an airway selected here so we can see how to enter the airways. Took me a little while to figure this out, but it's not too bad. So the first thing we need to do is go down to the Enroute line here just below, and we're going to put in our first waypoint, which is the YVR VOR, Vancouver VOR. So we do select that with the outer knob here, and we can do the same thing here. We'll just type in YVR. And there it shows Vancouver VOR in Canada, and we hit enter to accept. Now when we want to load an airway, and this is where I had trouble figuring out how to do this, so you're on the line below, you can enter in another waypoint, or here you can select menu and you can go load airway. So I just hit enter, and then I use the outer knob to cursor through the airways available over this waypoint. So we want the Victor 338, so I just cursor down to there, hit enter, and now it's going to show me the waypoints that are on that airway that I can go to. So we want to go to Janik, hit enter, so it shows YVR Moody Janik, and that is correct. Use the inner knob to get to load and go enter. So that's how you set up an airway. And then we need to put in another waypoint, so we just go down to the next, just below en route again, and we need to put in CCAB, so we just use the outer knob, and we can just type it in here again, or use the outer knob to select it, and we just go SEKAB, and there we go, that's in Canada. We can hit enter, and that's the last waypoint, so that is our route. And we can close that now, and we can just cursor out and just see if it kind of looks correct. So Vancouver, head up here to CCAB, and then direct to Kelowna. We're going to put an arrival in from CCAB, so that looks good. So what we can do next is we can load in the departure, and we're going to be doing the the Fraser 7 departure off of runway 8 right. So I'll select departures, enter, and that's the first one to pop up, Fraser 7, enter, and it's just off runway 8 is the only choice, so it's runway 8, 2,000 feet, and then right turn heading 098, so that's correct. And this manual sequence waypoint, I think that's what it stands for, is basically it's the end of this is just a heading departure using headings, so it puts in this manual sequence kind of because you're expecting radar vectors to your assigned route after that. So what the airplane will do is just continue on the heading. It does a little bit squirrely turn first, but then it eventually goes back to the heading. But anyway, we'll look at that when we depart here, but I can load that. So that shows the runway 8 Fraser departure, then we're going YVR, Moody, Janek, CCAB. And I might as well load in the arrival now here too, since I know what that's going to be. So that is going to be the CCAB 4. So we'll cursor down, select that. It's going to be for runway 34, and I've already compared the waypoints here, they're all correct, and we can just go down and select the inner knob, go down and load that up. So here's our whole flight plan now. You can see we got the departure, we got the en route, that looks good, and then when it goes to CCAB, and we'll have the arrival after that, and then en route we'll load in the approach. So there's the arrival. And once we're en route, we've got lots of time to load in the approach, so we'll do that en route. So that looks good. That's it for the flight plan. So now we'll just set up the autopilot, and then we will get up and on our way. So I'll just set up the range for that. We'll zoom out here. So I'll just show you the departure here. So it is going to be climb on a heading of 083, 2,000 feet, then right turn heading 098. Where's assigned, maintain 7,000, and expect radar vectors to the assigned route. So we'll just do it in heading select mode, but you'll see the track is on there when we head out here. So that's the departure. And so I'll put in the autopilot, 7,000 feet. There we go. I'll put our heading 083 to start, and so I think we're all set up. Just do a quick pre-takeoff check here. So we got flaps are at takeoff, put our boost pumps on, and landing light is on. Temperatures and pressures are all good. We got 7,000 feet and our heading's set, and I think we are good to go. So we'll get powered up here and take off. Before we go here, I'm just going to zoom in on the departure just to show you what the manual sequence items. So basically it's going to head off to 1,000 feet, then it's going to make the right turn if you're following the GPS track, and then it gets to this manual sequence point here. And what it does is if you leave it in tracking nav, tracking the GPS, it will follow this track, but when it hits this manual sequence, it'll start a turn, but then it realizes, because the track shows a turn here, to go back onto our route. But it realizes after it starts the turn and sequences past this manual sequence point that it's supposed to go back to runway heading. So it does a turn and then goes back to heading. So I'm just going to fly it in heading to prevent that, and then I'll show you how we actually get onto our track. Okay, so parking brake I think is released. We'll power up. Nope, it's not released, so we'll release the parking brake, power up to full power. Temperatures and pressures are looking good, airspeed's alive. And we got our rotate speed there around 80 knots. Rotate, positive rate, gears up. Get over to our heading here, 100 knots, flaps up. get it trimmed up. Through 400 feet, I'll select the autopilot on, flight level change, do 110 knots, and I'll engage heading select. Set our power for 95% or below, so 94 is fine. At 1,000 feet, we're going to do a right turn to heading 098. So there we go, and you can see its sequence on the GPS for that too. And we're continuing the climb to 7,000 feet. If I zoom in on the track here, so you can see it wants to fly this track until it gets a beam the waypoint, because it's done this a beam curve for passing by waypoints here. Once it hits the sequencing, it would go back to heading. So I'm just going to keep it in the heading, and then once ATC clears us to left turn climb on course, we will activate this leg here, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's do a post takeoff check. We got gears up, flaps are up. Shut our boost pumps off. Our power is set for the climb. We can shut our landing light off, and we'll continue on the climb, waiting for air traffic control to clear us en route. So here's our route from Vancouver VOR up to the first waypoint, and so we'll just simulate that ATC says turn left heading 070 and intercept the Victor 338. So we 070, and what I'll do now is I will go, so if you want to activate a leg, so you just go to your flight plan, and we want to activate the leg to Moody here, so from YVR to Moody. So I'll just clear that, I don't want that, so we'll cursor down to Moody, and what you do is select here menu, and you see activate leg pops up, so I just hit enter, and you can see now that leg has become active. So I'll remove the flight plan here. So we're on the heading intercept. We're still in heading select. Once we get a little bit closer to that, I'm going to engage nav mode, and then we'll just follow our flight plan from there. So you see the track is coming in, still climbing up. So now I'll just hit nav mode, and it might do a little bit of a turn here, but should stay on roughly on the heading that we had until it intercepts. So you see its GPS flight level change is active, and should turn onto our track. So that's how you navigate the departures. And if you had an LNAV departure where you had to fly an LNAV track, you would have just taken off in LNAV instead of heading select. But I find it easier just to actually do these heading departures just in heading mode. Okay, so that's the departure portion. Now we're going to climb up. I'm going to climb up to a final altitude of 13,000 feet for direction of flight. So let's just say ATC cleared us to 13,000 feet. So I'll put that in our altitude. And there we go. We'll continue on our track to 13,000 feet. I'll zoom out on the map here, and you can see now we're on our track to Moody, then Janek, then CCAB, and there's our arrival in there. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the departure portion. We're going to climb up to our cruise altitude. So what I'll do is I'll check in with you once we get leveled off, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we've leveled off at 13,000 feet, and we're just accelerating, and yeah, the terrain with this sim update, the Rockies look a little bit more smoothed out to me, and the scenery is a bit washed out. It's not as good as it used to be, but I see there's another sim update coming out, so hopefully it'll fix some of those problems. But anyway, we'll just continue on our trip here. So we're on our route. Right now we're still on the airway. Let's say ATC won't clear us direct to CCAB here. So the best way I found to do that is not just go right to the direct to feature here. Get a little bit of turbulence here over the Rocky Mountains. Best way I found to do that is to select the flight plan and cursor down to the waypoint using the inner knob here till you highlight the waypoint you want to go direct to. And then once that's highlighted, then select the direct to, and then it's automatically loaded in here. And then you just can go enter and activate. And now we close our flight plan, and then you see we're going direct to CCAB. So I find that's the easiest way to activate the direct twos. So now that we're tracking towards CCAB, that's the start of our arrival. I'm just going to go over the arrival here real quick with you. So we come in via CCAB, and we are following this track here. We're going to be going down to Ambat, and you see there's some altitudes. That's at or above 9,800. And then here it's max 210, which is not a problem for us, and that's hard at 9,500. And then at Ambat, it's hard at 8,000. So now on the NXi, they actually, if you go to the flight plan and you go down to the arrival, you will see these altitudes are coded in the flight plan. Now, unfortunately, they don't have at or above for 9,800. They have it hard at 9,800, and that's fine. I mean, that we can, as long as we abide by that altitude, at or above, so we can cross it at 9,800 feet is fine. And then they have 95 and 8,000, so those are all coded in there. So now, because of that, we look on here and we'll see a top of descent, and here a bottom of a descent. So it is saying that we need to start our descent here to reach that 9,800 feet for that fix here. So now we can activate a VNAV. So if I go over to the PFD here, you'll see it shows the next restricted altitude is 9,800 feet. We're currently at 13,000 feet. So once we get cleared for the arrival, I'm just going to center my heading bug here. Once we get cleared for the arrival, we can basically set, they're probably going to clear us down to 8,000 feet via the arrival here for the CCAB 4. So I'll set 8,000, and then I can engage VNAV, and then it should follow all those altitude restrictions, and we'll watch that as we come in. So what I'll do is I'll wait till we get to the top of descent there, and then we'll go over using that VNAV. Actually, before that, why don't we just load the approach too, and get that out of the way, so since we have the time. So the approach we're going to be doing is the, and I'll just bring that up here quick, is going to be the RNAV Zulu 34. And this is called an RNP approach, relative nav performance approach. So the nice thing about these approaches are they're curved approaches, and they can map the terrain, like stay over the lake here and the valley to get into the airport. So we're starting at Ambat here, and it's a nice curved approach. And the new NXi really flies these approaches really nicely, and it you see all these altitude restrictions. We've got 7,000, 5,600, 5,000, 4,400. It'll follow all those restricted altitudes all the way in. So it's a really nice approach. And then what you do is you activate the approach, and then you're going to do the LPV portion, or the final portion, using the glide slope from the FAF in. So starting before the FAF here, you just activate the approach. We'll go over that when we come in. But these are great approaches for these valleys. They're curved approaches. You can see here, if you're coming in this way, it follows this curve down here. They're really awesome approaches. So we're going to fly this approach. So let's load it into the GPS here. So we go to procedures, and we'll hit enter. And what I'm going to do is now, to avoid, this is where I hate clicking around in here because we're bouncing around in turbulence, but I have a Class Echo device which allows me to control this with my with the input device. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use that from now on. So here I select the RNAV 34 Zulu, hit enter. We want to do Ambat, select enter, and here I can select my minimums too, so I can turn that on, and I can select 1,806 feet, so I'll just put 1,810 feet, rounded up. So 1,810, and then I'll cursor down and we'll select load, and I'll hit enter. Now that approach is in our GPS. So if I go down and cursor through the approach here, that's the arrival still, and now you can see the RNAV approach. And if I bring up the approach here, sorry, that's the flight plan. If I bring up the approach here, we can compare all the waypoints. So we have MFAT, Pendo, and you can see all the altitudes are coded as well. So Pendo has to be at or above 7,000, and 5,600 for Zudov, and you just verify all those altitudes and everything. So they're all in here, and I verified them before, so they're all correct. So that's our RNAV Zulu approach for coming into, so that's ready to go, and it'll transition from AMBAT. Okay, so that's the approach loaded, and if I zoom out, we can see all the waypoints are in there as well, so they're all going to be coming in through here. So we'll see that a little more detail when we get a little closer. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue on. Once we get to the top of descent, we'll go over the VNAV, how to engage that and get it set up to fly the VNAV profile. So we'll see you at the top of descent in a little bit. Okay, so we're cruising along here. We're just coming up to the top of descent here shortly, and so now I'm going to talk about VNAV and how that works. So let's take a closer look at our nav display here. So you see the top of descent and bottom of descent, and what that represents. And if you go to the flight plan page here, you'll see a VNAV profile. So it says the next altitude we're targeting is 9,800 feet at LMOM, and to do that for a 3-degree glide path angle, we are going to need to fly 1,000 feet, just over 1,000 feet per minute descent, and so that's the target, and that's what's required based on the calculations. And so you can see, and that's 5 minutes away, so that's where you can find your VNAV information, and it'll sequence through each point that has an altitude restriction. So if you look in the flight plan here, and if I just cursor down to, so every point that has a restriction like that 9,500 will be the next one, and at Vivek there. So basically that is how the VNAV is going to work. So how do we engage the VNAV? Well, if I go over to our PFD here, and right now we're in altitude hold, the autopilot gauge tracking the GPS. And you can see we're at 13,000 feet, and our next target altitude is 9,800 feet. So let's say air traffic control said you're cleared to descend to 8,000 by the CCAB for arrival. So what I would do is I would select my altitude in the autopilot here. So I would select 8,000. And next what I would do is activate on the autopilot here VNAV, and this button actually works now. So if I push VNAV, you're going to see something pop up here. It's called VPath, and because it's white, that means it's armed. And you can see here there's a little caret, and that's our target rate of descent when we get to the path. And you can see the V here is our VNAV path, and we're below the path right now. So we're going to fly into it, like almost like flying into an ILS from below. And once we get closer, you'll see this come down, and once it gets centered, you'll see it target the rate of descent to keep that VNAV path centered, and you'll see this go active. And it will go down, and it will target that altitude, and it will stay at that altitude till it crosses that fix, and then it's going to sequence to the next targeted altitude, so you'll see that. So that'll be in a few minutes. So what I'll do is we got about 3 minutes to go, so I'll check in with you just as we hit that top of descent. Okay, so we are just coming up to the top of descent, and if I zoom in on the PFD here, you can see it's starting to come down, and once it gets here, this should go active, so it should go green, and then we'll target that rate of descent to stay on that path. Now, because we don't have an auto throttle, it's going to fly the path, but I have to control the speed with the throttle. So what you see here is now you see VPath is active. So I'll need to bring back the throttle to keep the speed under control. So I'll keep it about 255 or so. And you can see it's targeting, and it's going for that altitude. So that's the plan right now, and it's going to meet that altitude at LMOM, and then it will just level off at that altitude. And then again, when it levels off, I'll have to add power to keep the speed that I want. So it's very effective at flying VNAV, I've noticed from the couple of approaches I've done with this system so far. So while we're descending here, you can see there's lots of other items you can select here. I'm not going to go over them all today, but basically you can select your wind items and your bearing indicators and stuff like that. If you want to see those functions, just go look at my last video on my around the world trip to Lukla, Nepal, and I went over all these different options that are available so far on the NXi. It's a really nice system, and with this latest update, I really think it's worth using. So I really think it's really nice. Anyway, if you liked the content so far, make sure you hit the like button. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see more videos like this, or my Flight Around the World series and the Diamond DA62, make sure you subscribe to the channel and sign up for notifications, and you'll see those videos as they pop up. I try to do one every week, but sometimes life gets a little busy, so I don't always get one out every week, but I'll try to do one every week. So we're continuing on the descent. It's flying the path pretty good. That power setting's working pretty good. And we should level off at 9,800 feet momentarily, and then you'll see it cycle through. It should pop up 9,500 feet, I think, is the next restriction. And that's at 5 VEC there, so yeah, it's a really nice system for flying VNAV now in this aircraft. And then we'll talk about the curved approach when we get a little closer to setting up the approach and how I'm going to fly the RNP approach. RNP approaches are becoming really popular. They have nice curved profiles. You can do what's called a short gate approach, which is shortens up if you're coming downwind, shortens up your final turn. And makes it a lot more effective, a lot easier approach to fly than a standard GPS approach. So we're just coming through 10,000 feet. I'm just going to put my landing light on. And we should be leveling off here momentarily. And then I'll have to add some power to keep that speed. Just going to update my altimeter as we level off here. So it almost gets flies it so well that we're just hitting the waypoint and leveling off. It's like almost perfect. So level off, I'll add a little bit of power, keep the speed up. About 80% should be fine. And then now you'll see alt is captured, and then it's back arms VNAV path again, or VPath, and you can see it's targeted 9,500. So we are going to get a new, and we only have to lose 300 feet. So you can see the top of descent and the bottom of descent are almost right beside each other. So it's not a lot of altitude, but that's how the VNAV works. It just cycles through each restricted altitude. Even though I have 8,000 feet selected here, it's not going to go below the altitude until it's allowed to, and it's going to target whatever the next restricted altitude is. So it'll work like that all the way in, no matter how many step downs you have, and you'll see that on the approach here. So, and once we get in closer, you'll see how the approach is set up. It follows the curves really nicely, unlike the standard G1000. When you had these, if you loaded up this approach, you would see it would just be a straight line from waypoint to waypoint, and that's not how you're supposed to fly these approaches. You're supposed to, they're supposed to be coded with the curve procedures in there, so that you follow those curved paths to ensure your terrain avoidance, and then you have to stay within a certain tolerance of the GPS, so to stay on that track. So if you go outside that tolerance, then technically you should have to carry out a missed approach, but it doesn't really show the tolerances on here very well, but that's fine. It's still working really good in the sim right now. So what I'll do is we'll just cruise along here. It's going to take us a few minutes to get to that next, and if I go back to the flight plan here, it should show us the next step down as well. So it shows you 10 minutes to the next top of descent, and the target for that is 9,500 feet. So I'll see you just as we approach that top of descent, and we'll go over how we're going to set up the VNAV for the approach. See you in a little bit. Okay, so we're just coming up to the top of descent. You see the path here is starting to come back, and I haven't touched anything on here. I still kept 8,000 in, and now it's going to descend down to 9,500 feet for this waypoint here. And once we cycle by here, it should set the next one for 8,000 for AMBAT. So if I just go over to the PFD here, so once we get a beam, it should show up 8,000 up here. Oh, no, it's gone to 3,200. So let me see what that might be, the approach one that it's already put in there. So it's targeting now 3,200 as SAVUP, which is the FAF for the approach. Oh, that's because AMBAT is also the fix for the arrival. So it's cycled through saying that AMBAT is an arrival fix or is our approach fix. So that's fine. So now 3,200 is the next lowest altitude that we're going to want to select for our approach once we get clear for the approach. So let's say, look at the map here, and I'll just range out. So AMBAT is the start of the approach. So let's just say ATC clears us for the approach now. So via AMBAT we're cleared for the RNAV RNP 34. So what I can do then is go back to the PFD here, and once we get clear for the approach, I'm going to talk about how I'm going to set that up. So when I do this approach here, I'm going to want to use VNAV until I get to the FAF. So the FAF here is at SAVUP, which is at 3,200 feet, and you can see that's the lowest target altitude that it's going for once it starts the approach. And it's still going to abide by all these restricted altitudes on the way in, but 3,200 feet is what you want to set for your target. So once I get clear for the approach, I'm going to put 3,200 feet in my altitude selector. So let's say we just got clear for the approach. I would put 3,200 feet. And I'm still in alt hold here, but VPath is still active. So you can see the path starting to come in. And what it's going to do now is it's going to start that descent to hit AMBAT at 8,000. And then the next altitude is going to be Pendo at 7,000, and it's going to fly that path to maintain that all the way in. So we've started our descent. All I need to do now is adjust the power to keep the speed. So I'll set a power setting to keep around 150. And if we go over to our MFD, you can see it's going to fly that track. And this is where the curves show up really nicely on here. So this is how these approaches are supposed to be flown, with these curve sequences here. If you remember on the old G1000, if I loaded the approach, it would be straight lines from waypoint to waypoint, and that's not correct. For an actual RNP approach, that has to be depicted on your nav display like this, and you have to follow those curve tracks. So they're able to load that approach and have it depicted properly, which is great to see. It's really nice. Okay, so we're just following our descent here. Looks nice. We should cross AMBAT at 8,000 and then continue on in. So what happens is we're using VNAV to fly this profile for the start of the approach. And if I bring up the approach here again, you'll see that from the FAF on inbound, or from this point go back on inbound, we have a depicted 3.1 degree glide path that we're going to fly. And so what we want to do is, at some point before hitting the FAF, we want to arm the approach, and then we're going to make a transition from V path to glide slope, and you'll see that happen once we get a little bit closer. So you have to make sure that you arm the approach prior to hitting the FAF, so that you can make that transition from flying a VNAV profile to an approach profile. And we'll see that once we get closer to the FAF here. So we crossed AMBAT at 8,000, and our next altitude is Pendo at 7,000. And so we should stay above 7,000 feet till we get past Pendo. And just keep the power set, looks pretty good. So I'll just keep the map on here and watch our altitude. And this does a great job at flying the path all the way in. So it's really working well. Huge improvement from the first release of this modification. I highly recommend switching to it if you haven't already. So speed's looking good, just coming up on 7,000 feet, and we should hit Pendo right around 7. And then it's going to cycle to our next altitude there. So it's going to always meet those restricted altitudes that show up in your flight plan here. And as long as they're coded in your flight plan, if I just cursor down to the flight plan here, and you'll see it's going to meet all those restricted altitudes as long as they're in there. So it does a really good job at that, and it really does a good job at maintaining this curve. And then if you notice on the PFD here, to fly the curve, you can see the track continuously changing as you're in the turn here. On the old one, it would have just flipped right to the next track on a straight line. And here it's changing degree by degree to keep you on that curve. So it does a great job at it. It's really, really well done. You can see the Kelowna, there's the airport off over there, flying over the river and then the valley into the airport. And that's the beauty about these curved approaches. It allows you to get a lot lower than a standard VOR or NDB or even an ILS approach. Because of this valley, the limits on those approaches are very high if you have to fly those, and this one is going to take us down to minimums of 430 feet, which is pretty good. So it's maintaining the VNAV path, looking pretty good. Cycling through all these waypoints, flying the curve really nicely. So we're getting a little bit closer to landing. I'm going to bring my speed back a little bit, get it below 140 so we can start getting gear and flap ready to go. I'm going to put my fuel pumps on. Our landing light is on. And you can see the bottom of descent, so you can see it's targeting to hit SAV up here at 3,200 feet. And just prior to SAV up, I'm going to arm the approach, and then you'll see on the autopilot indicator up here what is going to be armed, along with the V-Alt, or the Alt-V, sorry. So what Alt-V means is that it's armed to level off at 3,200 feet if I don't do anything else with this setup here. But the glide slope, when that pops up when we arm the approach, is going to supersede that V-Alt. And then we'll continue on the approach. So speed is good. Just going to update my baro. Okay, we've got 1,000 feet to go, and once I go past the next waypoint, I'm going to arm the approach. For the heading, I'm just going to put runway heading, or the final heading right now, which is 339, just as a reference in case we have to do an overshoot. And I'll just talk about the missed approach. It basically will climb straight ahead, and it says climb to 8,000. Missed approaches aren't coded in here yet, so I'm just going to fly a modified missed approach, which will be runway heading to 8,000. Okay, so we passed rock cut, and so what I'm going to do now is arm the approach, and you'll see what changes up here. So, and we already captured the glide path right away. So a white diamond popped up here, and glide path was armed, but we were close enough to it that we already captured it. So now we're on a glide path. So it's going to ignore that altitude now because we've captured the glide path, and we'll fly that all the way down to our minimums of 1,810 feet. So the FAF coming up, I just want to get configured, so I'll put my gear down. We'll select our approach flaps. And it's continuously flying this track here. You can see we've gone through the 3,200 because the glide path is active, so we're just continuing now along the final portion of the approach. And it's still flying the nice curve to get us lined up in the valley here. So these approaches are really nice for these valleys, that's for sure. So right now I'm coming up to the final waypoint, and we got gear down, flaps are at approach, landing lights on, boost pumps are on. And what I can do now is because I've captured the glide path, I'm going to put my misapproach altitude in here, and that's 8,000 feet. And so I've got the heading set and the misapproach altitude set if I need to do a misapproach. So it's looking pretty good, just inside the final fix here. And I'm going to slow down now. Get my final flap out, and the speed for that is, if you look down here, they have the speed, so it's 119 knots I have to be below for the final flap. So then the speed bleed off, and I'll select final flap, and you can see our minimums indicator is 1810. It's just coming up there. Go for about 100 knots. And there's minimums. And I got the runway in sight. I'll disengage the autopilot, and we'll start slowing down to our landing speed. And gear is down. Flaps are full. Landing, so we're looking good. And bring the power back. Touchdown. Welcome to Kelowna. Beautiful day here in the valley. And we'll just get stopped, and I'll just stop here on the runway. And set the parking brake. And there you go. That is full procedure, departure, loading Airways, flying the Airways, going direct to setting up the arrival. The approach for an RNP approach, which is an approach probably a lot of people haven't used before, and there's tons of them around. They're becoming more and more prominent. So that covers everything. I think this latest update to the G1000 NXi by Working Title has really hit it out of the ballpark for functionality. I have no qualms about using this in VATSIM or flying instrument procedures. It seems to work very well. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember, if you liked it, hit the thumbs up, and sign up for subscriptions if you haven't subscribed before, and check out my other videos. Appreciate you joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's content, and we'll see you next time. Bandit out.